GoForThe2.com in with the Week 8 college predictions. Let's jump right into it. Thursday night game. Yes, this Thursday, Pac-12 battle between Stanford and Arizona State. Both teams are coming out of a bye week. Stanford's won 3 of the last 4 over the Sun Devils by 16 points per game. They picked up this victory last year in Palo Alto, 34-24, but I think it's a tale of two different teams. In my opinion, I think Stanford is a reeling football team, a one-dimensional offense that's only averaging 85 rushing yards per game, and more importantly, only converting around 34% of their third down attempts. On the flip side, you have an Arizona State offense that's very balanced. They're rushing for 171 yards per game, also passing for right in the area of about 242 per game with their mobile quarterback, Manny Wilkins, that has completed 63% of his passes, 1,446 yards, 11 passing touchdowns, and only 1 interception. He does have a big play wide receiver in Harry that could stretch Stanford's defense vertically. Stanford's given up around 235 passing yards to opposing quarterbacks. And when you look at this matchup as well, Arizona State is converting 48% of their third down attempts heading into this ballgame. Arizona State is a very physical, athletic defensive front as well. They're holding opposing offenses to 156 rushing yards per game, giving up around 222 through the air to opposing quarterbacks. But they do have 18 total sacks on the year through 6 games. They're going to be going up against an offensive unit in Stanford that has allowed 14 total sacks heading into this matchup and a one-dimensional offense. Stanford cannot run the football consistently. It started when they faced Oregon in week number 3. It's continued through last 2 weeks ago against Utah. They averaged 72 rushing yards against Oregon. They only averaged 56 against Notre Dame and 42 rushing yards against Utah in that blowout home loss. That's forcing them into long third down situations, and that's where I think it favors Arizona State's speed, not only offensively, but defensively in this matchup. Whether Bryce Love plays or not, in my opinion, does not matter. Arizona State's the superior team. They pick up a 7-point win at home over Stanford, 31-24 in this matchup Thursday night. Another intriguing battle this Saturday, Big Ten battle between Penn State and Indiana. Penn State's owned the series, winning 4 of the last 5 over the Hoosiers by 18.2 points per game. Picked up this victory last year in Happy Valley with a dominating 45-14 home win over the Hoosiers. It started on the opening kickoff with Saquon Barkley's kickoff return. They never looked back, but Indiana has a lot to play for in this battle. I picked against Penn State last week against Michigan State. They gave up 295 passing yards to Brian Lewerke. Last-second touchdown to Felton Davis that did give Michigan State the 21-17 road win over the Nittany Lions. When you look at Penn State on the road over the last couple of years under James Franklin, 10-5 overall in matchups. They've played much better at home than they have on the road. They did pick up a solid quality Big Ten win over Illinois 3 weeks ago, but they struggled through 3 quarters in that battle. But more importantly, it comes down to a couple of factors. Penn State is now out of the national championship picture. They're on the outside looking in for the Big Ten title, and they do have Iowa at home on deck. Are they looking ahead in that matchup against a blue-collar, physical Indiana team? Indiana does have a balanced offense. They're averaging around 156 rushing yards per game, passing for 249 through the air with their quarterback, Peyton Ramsey. I think he can make enough plays on Penn State's defense vertically. Penn State over the last couple of weeks in terms of opposing quarterbacks, they allowed 270 to Dwayne Haskins and 295 last week to Brian Lewerke. To me, that's the difference. Peyton Ramsey and Indiana are in this game from start to finish. In the end, I do feel that Penn State does pick up a 28-24 road win over Indiana, but it is a lot closer than people think, and Indiana pushes Penn State to the limit in Bloomington this coming weekend. We'll stick in the Big Ten. It's a rivalry game. It's Michigan State Michigan with a dominating home win over Wisconsin. They rushed for 320 yards on the Badgers. On the flip side, you have a renewed Michigan State team that did pick up the upset win over Penn State on the road. They've owned Michigan over the last few years, winning 4 of the last 5 by 15 points per game. They won this battle 15-10 last year in Ann Arbor. They forced 5 turnovers. This is a team in Michigan State that has not lost a turnover battle to Michigan since 2011. Yes, 7 straight years they haven't lost a turnover battle. That's going to be a critical factor heading into this ball game against the Wolverines. When you look at Michigan overall, averaging 217 rushing yards per game and passing for 201 yards through the air, but a different rushing offense in 2 road games against Notre Dame and against Northwestern. This is an offense that's only averaged 116 rushing yards per game, going up against still one of the top rushing defenses in college football in Michigan State, giving up only 62 rushing yards to opposing offenses. But to me, this is the reason why you got Shea Patterson from Michigan. He's the difference maker in this ball game. This is why he came from Ole Miss to Michigan to win ball games specifically for this type of matchup. Good teams are able to win on the road. A lot of pressure on Michigan in this battle, but I think they step up. This is a Michigan offense that's converting 48% of their third down conversions and holding opposing offenses to 32% of their third down attempts. When you look at Michigan State overall, they're still a one-dimensional offense. They're passing for 275 through the air with Brian Lewerke only averaging 123 rushing yards per game. They averaged 123 against Penn State last week. Before that, against Northwestern, it was only 96 rushing yards in that loss, 10-point loss to the Wildcats. This is a Michigan defense holding opposing offenses to 108 yards per game on the ground, and more importantly, only 129 passing yards against opposing quarterbacks. If they force Brian Lewerke into long third down situations, that's the matchup for Michigan's defense. A lot of pressure on Michigan, but I think they step up and do get a convincing 38-24 win over Sparty this coming weekend. Not going to be easy. Michigan is only 7-7 since 2017 on the road or on a neutral field site under Jim Harbaugh, but I do feel they have the better quarterback, the better offense and defensive line play heading into this battle. This is a defense in Michigan that does have 20 total sacks heading into this matchup, holding opposing offenses to 33% on third down conversions, and their quarterback, Shea Patterson, 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. I think he's the difference in this ball game. Michigan gets a 14-point win over Sparty this coming weekend. Another intriguing battle is a Pac-12 battle between USC and Utah. USC's won 3 of the last 5 over Utah by 11.6 points per game. Picked up this victory last year in the Coliseum. A 1-point win, 28-27 over Kyle Whittingham and Utah. They went for 2, did not get it. It was the mobility of Williams, their quarterback, that put pressure on USC's defense on the perimeter. When you look at USC overall, this is still a one-dimensional offense, passing for 255 through the air. They're averaging around 126 rushing yards on the ground, but their quarterback, JT Daniels, is starting to get acclimated into the scheme. 58% completion percentage, over 1,500 yards. He passed for 272 last week, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions against a quality defense in Colorado, in my opinion. Colorado secondary, very strong heading into that matchup in week number 6. They were able to take advantage of that defense, stretch them vertically, and I expect that to continue on the road in Salt Lake City this coming weekend. Now, turnover margin is a concern for USC heading into this ballgame. They're -6 in turnover margin. On the flip side, Utah's -1, but still, when I look at the defense overall, when you look at USC, only allowing 32% on third down conversions, and their offense is converting 48% of their third down attempts. As long as they can move the chains, I think they'll be in this game from start to finish. I think it's a high-scoring battle. In the end, USC does pick up the 31-28 win over Utah this weekend. Utah very solid themselves. They're giving up 229 passing yards per game, only 77 rushing yards per game, and holding opposing offenses to 33% on third down conversions. But typical speed teams give Utah's defense some worries. They step up against blue collar teams, but when speed teams could stretch them vertically with playmakers on the perimeter, Utah typically struggles. They haven't played an offense like USC up until this point in the season, even though Washington, they played very well. Washington, in my opinion, not as elite in terms of the outside wide receiver play as USC. I think USC does take advantage and gets a very close win over Utah this coming weekend, 31-28. Let's keep it in the ACC, a very intriguing battle between Virginia and Duke. I was on Virginia last week against Miami. They didn't disappoint. More importantly, they're starting to buy into Bronco Mendenhall's offense and defensive schemes. They held Miami 15 of 29, 51%, no passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions. That's a key factor heading into this matchup against Duke. Now, Virginia's matched up very well against Duke over the last 3 years. They've won 3 straight over the Blue Devils and have won those games by 9.6 points per game. I think people are expecting an emotional letdown after their upset win over Miami, but I think this is a focused football team in Virginia. They're averaging around 183 rushing yards per game, passing for right in the area of about 217 with their quarterback, Bryce Perkins. He stepped up, made enough plays with his legs, and made some solid decisions in the passing attack last week against Miami to put his team in a position to win. They go on the road against a Duke Blue Devils defense that's giving up around 196 passing yards per game. I think that's the matchup. I think Virginia's able to run the football with Jordan Ellis. The mobility of Bryce Perkins on the perimeter is able to create some plays, and I think Virginia does strike the upset 27-21 over Duke. This possibly could be one of the most underrated teams in the ACC. They played very well at home. They do have a road loss, but let's keep in mind it was to NC State and played very well against Ryan Finley, both offensively and defensively. I like Duke, but in the end, I do like Virginia to strike the upset 27-21 over the Blue Devils. Duke is a solid team. Virginia is better at this point in the season, getting better quarterback play than Daniel Jones. Virginia strikes the 6-point upset over Duke this coming weekend. Big 12 battle between Texas Tech and Kansas. Texas Tech has owned this series, won the last 5 games over Kansas by 28.6 points per game. They picked up this victory last year, 55-19. But there's a factor why I like Kansas in this matchup to keep this game very close. Texas Tech did get solid quarterback play. They have some quarterback issues heading into this matchup, but they did get solid backup quarterback play in the win over TCU, 17-14. This is a defense in Texas Tech that's holding opposing offenses to only 30% on third downs, but they do have Iowa State on deck in week number 8 and 9, That could be a look-ahead spot for Texas Tech, but more importantly, Kansas is forcing turnovers. Carter Stanley will get the start over Bender in this matchup. This is a team in Kansas that's plus 13 in turnover margin that leads FBS in turnover margin. As long as they're able to force turnovers in this ballgame, I think they can keep this game very close. They have a big play running back in Puka Williams, and more importantly, from a defensive perspective, playing well, forcing teams to methodically work down the field. They had a solid defensive game plan in place against Will Grier and West Virginia. They forced Will Grier to check down underneath with short to intermediate throws. Look for the same type of defense against Texas Tech. They're going to look to run the football with Williams, look to work off a play action with Carter Stanley. In the end, Texas Tech wins, but I think it's very close. I think it's a 40-30 win over the Jayhawks. They're looking ahead to week number 9 against Iowa State, and that's the matchup in that ballgame. One more battle. It's a critical battle in the Big 12. It's Oklahoma and TCU. Oklahoma's won 5 of the last 6 over TCU and has really dominated the series by 11.8 points per game, won both of those matchups in the Big 12 championship game and on the road in Norman over TCU. But a couple of factors. TCU coming off a loss Thursday night to Texas Tech. You look at the coaching matchup here. Lincoln Riley and Oklahoma coming out of a bye week after their loss to Texas, a rivalry game. They lost that matchup. They now have a lot of work to do to get back to possibly a college football playoff appearance. But I give the coaching advantage to TCU in this matchup. And more importantly, defensively, they're still playing well. TCU holding opposing offenses to 30% on third downs, only giving up 130 rushing yards per game and only 182 passing yards per game. They're forcing teams to work down the field. This is an offense in Kyler Murray in Oklahoma that's averaging 217 rushing yards per game and passing for over 300 through the air against Big 12 defenses. But I don't think it matters. I know TCU's been struggling in terms of turnover margin, but I think they keep this game very close. They're still averaging around 175 rushing yards per game. They're passing for over 200. Haven't gotten solid quarterback play from Sean Robinson, but I think this is their Super Bowl. They're sitting at 3-3 overall. They need a bounce-back game. Look for TCU to pull out all the stops against Oklahoma. Gary Patterson strikes the upset. I'm calling for it 35-30 over the Sooners this coming weekend. Both Big 12 underdogs will step up and force the issue against the favorites in this ballgame. Stay with me all season long at goforthe2.com. If you want all the top 25 battles, tune into the radio and TV show this coming Saturday, every Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern to 1 p.m. Eastern, Fantasy Sports Radio and Television Network, channel 238, or stream it on YouTube, FNTSY, College Football Today. Have a great week, everyone. See you on Saturday.